Well, I would say that the overkill, sometimes called the blitzkrieg hypothesis, was on its way to being discredited within the last 20 to 30 years. We go back to Paul C. Martin in the 50s and 60s, who pretty much took those ideas, which had been around for a long time, and put them together in a system, put them together in a coherent, testable hypothesis, right? Well, his work on overkill became sort of the dominant. And what's interesting and ironic in a way is that when you look at some of those earlier commentators who are endorsing the overkill hypothesis, are saying, well, as we're looking at the demise of the megafauna, it seems too catastrophic to blame on gradualistic climate change. So it must have been something completely outsized. The Clovis people sweeping across the Bering Land Bridge, slaughtering pretty much everything in its path, obviously, to affect such a total extirpation of these great species. Which the very first time I ever encountered that theory, I thought, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. But I think what has happened, from my reading of it, is that idea has been revived within the last decade or so, because we now have extinction has become very much a political hot potato, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I know where you're heading. Yeah,
you know where I'm heading. Well, this provides Exhibit A that humans have essentially slaughtered, dozens, if not hundreds of species before, and bolsters the case. It does. It gets into the idea that extinction now is a political controversy.
It does. And to say that we shouldn't attribute the last extinction to humans doesn't undermine our responsibility for the current extinction.
Of course.
But it is a convenient narrative to say, and it feeds a lot of the current political narrative that we're at fault for all we do, or for all bad things that happen. Well, it's just global warming as well, and I think we share similar views on that I think that negatively influences the debate as well. Now, strangely enough, it's the wonderful dollars that are put into paleoclimatology to go out and study ancient climate based off our concern from anthropogenic global warming that's going to actually prove that we got a bigger problem than the one that's driving the dollars.
Yes.
And it does not mean that AGW is not a concern for people who don't need to address it. But the way I put it is that the Younger Dryas event, which will ultimately be proven with global warming dollars, that the Younger Dryas event is going to quickly make the driving narrative and the thesis for making those investigations and the argument about them look like we're sitting on the train tracks arguing about the radio station. That we're arguing about one thing that really isn't that relevant if you look at the threat that we're facing over a millennial timescale and maybe even a sub-millennial timescale.
Yes.
That we got bigger problems and we need to address those first or in concert with our own damage to the earth.
I have been cataloging, I'll say, events of various scales of catastrophe, looking at what would, let's say, a Younger Dryas level catastrophe do to modern civilization. And I think what we could say is that it would pretty much terminate it. I mean, because you have an event, that might be regional or might be local, but if it's regional or even continental, you have a long period of restoration after that and recovery. But when we look at the Younger Dryas, what we're seeing almost is a succession of things. It wasn't, and this is one of the things the critics have sort of jumped on, is because it wasn't one single event. There was a melting event at 14,005, 14,006. Then there's the Younger Dryas boundary at 12.9. Then there's another extreme melting event at 11.6. Well, these two melting events, of course, require tremendous inputs of energy. This is why I've been kind of considering the possibility of the role of the sun in this whole thing as well, because recent research has suggested that the sun might be vulnerable to the infall of comets. And solar grazing comets now have become a whole new species of comet. And there are hundreds of them now cataloged they're continuously falling into the sun, and there seems to be a relationship between the infall of sun-grazing comets and solar activity, which to me is
the Kreutz sun grazers or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yes. Well, I think we're just beginning, I think, to appreciate how intrinsically a part of the cosmic environment our planet really is.
Yeah, it's not a closed system.
No, it is not.
I've heard it, referred to. We have the Aristotelian view that we have still have a perfect, like they used to kind of picture things, unchanging ticking clock that we're a part of, that we don't need to worry about, that the clock was almost made for us. And that we are separate from the clock, and people accept today that we have a lot of responsibility for our own destiny in an ecological sense, but they focus almost too much on it and don't realize that we have a responsibility to defend ourselves from what might be a damn mean clock when it hits certain hours.
We have to understand that the history of our planet reveals that it's profoundly dynamic.
That's right.
Way more dynamic than somebody had imagined a generation or two ago. And part of the problem to me is that the models that we're now looking at in climate change have their roots in the 1988 to 1992 creation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and its subsidiary body, the IPCC, essentially who are mandated with the task of proving that humans were causing climate change. Well, that's important. That's important to understand because we are influencing the climate change. However, because it became a political issue, that became the singular focus, right? What you were talking about is that there's this extraneous material that's almost coming up haphazardly.
Right.
Because what we are learning, what we are learning about the climate history of Earth is that it is extremely dynamic and quite frequently catastrophic. And we're only at the beginning of figuring out the multiplicity of triggers. But like you just said, we may have a much bigger concern, for example, than the increase of carbon dioxide by, basically 1 molecule of CO2 for every 10,000 molecules of air.
That's right.
There may be something.
Randall, you just said a climate scientist is attached to the narrative. Can y'all still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Or I thought I hit my mic off. That the climate scientists, for better or worse, it's okay for them now, I think, even if they aren't on a personal mission to ignore data and hype the risk, all of them feel comfortable picking up the phone and telling the reporter it's far more dangerous than anyone appreciates, and this is an emergency. Okay, that is the narrative, better or worse, true or not. Strangely enough, if you call the impact frequency scientists, of which there are far, far, far fewer than even climate scientists who are scarce, if you call the people who are responsible for, evaluating the frequency of cosmic impacts on Earth, their job seems to be to tell you it's not a problem, it's not a problem, it's not a problem.
Yes, it's not a problem. Exactly.
Which is an awkward position for them because they'll both say, unlike the climate, it's not a problem. I do need some more research money. We need to refine this impact frequency better, but it's not a problem. And frankly, without being too conspiratorial, but let me go ahead and go there, that I think that comes from a 1970s Cold War mentality that said anything that was coming out to present a threat that didn't have to do with the Soviet Union is just not something we need to spend any dollars on. And that was a good damn decision. Because we needed to solve that damn threat first. And I think, to some degree we did. We put it behind us. But what did we pick up as the next global threat? The change in temperature of 1.5 degrees C over the next 100 years. Instead of looking again, my God, the sensors that go and record atmospheric booms, as you know, are the same sensors that record the nuclear weapons. That's why they're there. They're to enforce the nuclear test ban treaty, right? Those sensors around the world. They're also the very best devices in the world to reveal atmospheric impacts from regular meteor showers and from right.
And they've done that.
And they are absolutely reluctant to release the data. They actually
Mm-hmm.
took it offline a few years ago. They made it
Yeah.
harder to get that data, and they only
Yes.
release it in tranches with no explanation whatsoever. For God's sakes, if they pick up something that looks like a nuclear bomb in the Pacific Ocean and it isn't, and they rule that out, please tell me the next day
Mm-hmm.
that something blew up above the Pacific that looked like a nuclear bomb, but we ruled it out.
Yeah.
And right now, if I remember correctly, it could be a couple of years. They'll put it out. They scrub the data, whatever. But the idea of letting those same systems and techniques and global space technology be applied to this, to true threats, not just, and it's amazing to me the number of missions that do evaluate asteroid threat.
Mm-hmm.
The money that is put into it, it's not as much as any of us would like. But at the same time, they will tell you that there's really no threat. I don't know how the hell they know that. Right. And I don't know why they're spending all the money to look into it when at the same time they're telling you it's not a threat. It's never added up. They're sitting there bouncing stuff off of them, seeing if you can damn affect them with kinetic energy. I mean, pretty soon they'll be painting one white on a side like they say can move it. You know, yep. God knows all the different ways. It's the only natural catastrophe that can theoretically be averted with existing technology.
Yes.
You cannot stop an earthquake. You cannot stop a hurricane.
Volcano.
But the problem with, volcano, exactly. But with the asteroid and comet threat, your problem's picking the different ways to do it. There are a number of different ways to do it. And we do investigate those, but at the same time, so again, not to step in the conspiracy zone, but I've always thought that didn't add up, that we're out there doing the kind of work that we do. And NEO-wise, which is looking at it through infrared, that seems controversial to me. And Nathan Myhrvold, if you go down that rabbit hole, the chief technology officer, a billionaire with Microsoft, was one of the billionaires that came out with Steve Ballmer and Alan, the co-founder with Bill Gates. And there's another billionaire, a guy named Nathan Myhrvold. Hell, he's been tearing their ass off for the last 3 years saying that your impact frequency estimates are absolutely dead wrong, and I'm proving it mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a little bit of and that you're hiding data. There's something going on at NASA, but I've stepped too far there, if you will, because I try to stick with, representing at least some of the stuff that the Comet Research Group has said, which does not include any of those speculations.
Right, but you've got every month we're documenting the cosmic debris flying through near Earth space.
And as you have well documented, it's not the asteroids that are the problem. Although that could definitely happen, it's the comet debris.
Comet debris.
And that you encounter, as you have taught me a lot about, including Dr. Napier's taught me a lot about, and we both got the science from him, that the Taurid Meteor stream presents an unusually high, a certain periodicity of dangerous objects that you go across here's how Dr. Napier explained it to me, and you've explained this before, but I don't think it can be said enough, that when we cross that meteor stream every late June and every late October, early November, which my absolute favorite presentation of yours, Randall, is the Halloween Taurid story.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't make your skin crawl and say that these people, the ancients, are talking to us, that there is a rhythm out there, there's a music, that they are absolutely singing a tune to us. And if you tune in right, you can hear it. And what they're saying is something happened. Worldwide, they celebrate that week of death. And then you look at late June, and that's when Tunguska happened. And that's when, that on June 30th. That those two times that we already have a meteor shower that's not the best meteor shower, but it's known for its very bright fireballs, right? That the British neo-catastrophists led by Napier reverse engineered and found out that those two periods each year, it's like us walking across a highway blindfolded.
Yeah.
Now, if you walk across your local highway blindfolded, you're actually going to be okay most of the time, believe it or not. Particularly those times late at night. You're going to be fine from 2 a.m. to probably 4 or 5 a.m. You're totally fine. You'll probably make it through at 10 a.m. to 11.
Yep.
But by God, there's some times where it's absolute rush hour and there are a bunch of fucking trucks out there.
Yep.
And that happens about every 3,000 years, it seems. And there's reason to believe that there was a period of enhanced truck traffic about 13,000 years ago, and we called a bad day. And all of their science is completely separated from the archaeological forensic investigations that are done by the YD team. Now, Dr. Napier, who is a patriarch of that body of science, which just took 40 years for them to develop, he only plugged that in later and became a part of the Comet Research team. He only came in on later papers. He had already proven to his own satisfaction and the satisfaction of the peer reviewers, not proven, but at least provided good enough science to be well published with Victor Klube and others and David Asher for 30 years, saying that you have enhanced periods that we should expect there to be visible bombardments that affected cultural change of human civilization, and we would have expected them to come in this periodicity, and they came from a disintegrating comet 20 to 30,000 years ago, which is progressively broken up, and that we're going into that traffic that it's created.